Please be seated. The record will show the presence of the jury, the defendant, and counsel. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. So that you're all able to brave the traffic and make it here this morning. All right. Ms. Craven, you are still under oath. Do you understand?
I do.
Ms. Elise, you may continue. Follow up on the juror questions.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning, Janet.
Good morning.
Because this was last week, I'm going to do my best to restate the question. Is that acceptable, Your Honor?
You may.
Okay. So I believe there was a question about if someone like Bridget needed more help than you could provide, who would you refer her people to? Do you remember the question, something like that? Okay. So, there were women in the temple, at least one, Mary, Goddess Mary, Elizabeth Leiden, came from a woman's shelter for homeless families. Do you recall that? That she was hated by them and even honored by them when she first came to temple?
I remember Mary. I'm not completely remembering the background story.
Okay. Do you remember taking actions to help a practitioner known as Mariana, to help her leave, to get to a detox?
Yes.
Okay. And also, and it was not in Temple Detox, we helped her go there?
Correct.
Okay. And then that happened more than once with that practitioner Diana.
Correct.
She had to be taken to a detox facility. And then this opens up the question of what types of help was available. So, if a woman needed some counseling in the temple, could you describe any channels where she might achieve counseling, talking with someone about her problems? Could you speak to that?
Well, we specifically had Wayne Clayton, who was trained in abusive type therapies, counseling.
Would you meaning his therapies are not abusive, he's treating abusive people who've been abused?
I apologize, yes. Yes. He treated abusive type situations. There were many practitioners trained in many healing type Reiki, releases of energy. So there were many different modalities inside of the temple. If those were not what the person was looking for, or they didn't experience completion, we would then recommend that they would go outside the temple to receive whatever healings they may be looking for.
Thank you. And so the temple had a sort of mother-father principle going on. Do you agree?
Yes.
And the two offices at the very front of the building, one was for the temple mother, who you would go to, like you go talk to your own mother.
Yes.
That was what happened when you were in office. Do you agree?
Yes.
If they needed to hear from their mother, unconditional love, get a hug, that kind of thing, complain about partners, kids, hairdresser, bad haircut, whatever, they would come talk to you.
Quite often.
And then priest Robert Cohen, temple man Robert Cohen, he occupied the temple father office.
Yes.
So that if anyone needed masculine wisdom, a more linear kind of response, perhaps a different kind of wisdom response, that was available too.
Yes.
And both you and Robert would stop what you're doing and talk to people if they were in crisis.
Yes.
Close your door, put something on it, say, please take, see Gabby or whatever.
Yes.
So anybody could come to you in a crisis moment, to you or Robert, receive mother or father love.
Yes.
And either of you would close the door and say, let's talk.
Yes.
And then there were people trained in life coaching.
Yes.
A number of them in the building.
Yes.
And there were a number of people who were ordained in other ministries.
Yes.
So if there was a practitioner who was suffering in silence, is it possible that they never got past the shame to talk about it with the people at Temple? And so they might have been putting on a happy face, and with all that help around, they just didn't ask.
And never spoke about it, yes.
Do you remember what types of healing would be available for a woman in crisis? And let's address only those things which wouldn't require her to have any money. Things that she could ask for at Temple, where she might get a little miniature healing or a longer healing. Can you describe any situations where you saw a practitioner just give a healing to someone else with no Temple held the space, the practitioner gave their time, and someone received a healing, and there was just...
That happened quite often.
With no money, no...
With no money.
So again, if a woman needed physical healing, she might have had a number of avenues to ask for healing and receive healing, regardless of what her financial state.
Yes.
And they could also step into classes and be a demonstration body and receive a whole bunch of healing for an afternoon. And some people did that.
Yes.
So there was counseling available, healing available. What kinds of educational opportunities do you remember? Something where someone could get a new skill set, get a new attitude. What sorts of classes and courses do you recall? Just that could help someone who was not feeling strong in themselves.
There were so many. I spoke about the international people coming through. There were classes every single weekend. Various topics. There were modality courses that were a couple of days to a week, could be a couple hours, certificated classes that were available, whatever type of instructional, educational value that they would be looking for was certainly available on a pretty constant basis. We also had a relationship with the Sedona Temple. There was always some things available up there if they felt they wanted to do like a retreat, like kind of get out of the city, get out of their own day-to-day life and go kind of unplug and do some healing work up there, or class work up there. That was available as well.
And in particular in the Phoenix Temple, all of this, the practitioners and really any women who came to us for help were guided into these programs regardless of their ability to pay.
Yes.
So there was a lot of help available. We also provided, there was a clothing rack in the dressing room where women would put clothing that they no longer wore, and then the other women who maybe didn't have as much would take the clothing.
Yes.
We offered frequently to give practitioners rides to airports, doctor's appointments, counseling.
Yes.
Even help them pick up their kids if their car was broken. pick up their car at the shop, drop their car at the shop. Temple supported the women as if they were queens, almost.
Yes, there was a period of time where we actually had a temple van specifically for that.
So one of the jury questions, I believe, was, why would you not let them back? I think there was maybe referring to a practitioner being asked to leave or something. Why would you not allow them back? It's all about helping and healing. And then you said, we did not allow them back.
Correct.
If someone left with difficulties like Mariana, she had I believe it was alcohol issue.
Yes.
So she did come back to Temple. She was a guest from out of state. We did allow her to come back on a number of occasions.
Yes.
And each time there was some specific protocols in place for her based on her history with the Temple.
Yes.
So she had some restrictions and some expectations that were unique to her that everybody else didn't have.
Correct.
And was there a contract or a little agreement that people that were in this situation, was there an agreement, a written agreement of what they would, was there a written agreement or was it just verbal?
I recall a discussion about having an agreement. Whether we completed that, I'm not certain.
Thank you. So, but there were ways for someone who'd been disfellowshipped to simply call up and say, I've handled my problem, I'd like to come back.
Yes.
And did those people frequently not have any money whatsoever, and they didn't have even sometimes bus fare to get to the Temple?
Yes.
So once they've been members of Temple family, we pretty much treated them like family afterwards.
Yes.
Another question, I believe, was, if I go to a church and have no money to give, I would not be asked to leave that church. So we never asked anybody to leave for not having money.
No.
It's true that we offered tuition payment programs.
Yes.
And part of the discussion was the teachers and the school needed money. Do you agree that there was a goal to begin getting, I think it was 25% of our revenue coming in from the school in the coming year? Our goal was to expand that source of revenue for the Temple.
Yes, we were looking at expanding that significantly.
And part of that was because we realized that whenever a successful practitioner is created, they frequently want to travel. When they become a successful practitioner, they want to travel sometimes.
That was quite often true.
And some of them would move away and open their own temple spaces.
Yes.
Now, and then the second part of this jury question, it seems, is about not giving money. And then it says, because you are not listed as a 501c3. So, to clarify, it was your understanding through me and the teachings that I had received that there is such a thing as an unregistered religious entity called a free church.
Yes.
And I may have showed you some articles or links about that. Do you remember? We definitely talked about the status of a free church.
Yes.
That there is such a status. And then the Phoenix Goddess Temple being a kind of feminine entity, we were looking to partner with someone that might be led by a kind of more father energy. We were looking to partner with other groups in a more meaningful way, actually partner with another church or become part of a bigger organization. Do you agree?
Yes.
And so when the Aqaba Native American Church offered us a charter, we discovered that it also came with a 501c3 status that would then blanket our entire organization.
Yes.
And you recall that we received that paperwork and that status in July of 2011.
Yes.
From a process that began in around October of 2010, when I asked you for funds so that I could personally join the church. I sent you an email and said, can we please let me join this church? And you said, okay.
Yes.
It was the first step to begin relating to the church. I'm having a little trouble, which are the jury questions, so okay, here we go, looks like. So it looks like the jury question had something to do with that the temple expected seekers to have a sexual release to get their money's worth. That's a statement or a question from the jury. And so I'm going to ask you, that might be one person's angle on that. Isn't it true that what the priestesses and healers of the mother would say, seekers are hoping that their energy will be received? Isn't that really,
yes.
That would be more the way we would say that. Do you think that a sexual orgasm or energy shift, personal nova, as we called it, was the only thing of value received by the seeker in the chamber?
Absolutely not.
Could you speak to any other aspects of value that you might have heard directly from seekers? Other types of value other than an orgasm that they
hearsay.
Sustained.
Mrs. Craven, did you ever hear any seekers, did any seekers ever speak to you regarding their experience in the transformation chambers? Did you ever have a talk with a seeker after they came out of a ceremony, or they're on the phone coming back for a second ceremony, and they said to you, I've never experienced this before, this is new, or?
Objection, hearsay.
Overruled. Do you answer yes or no? Did you have any conversations like that?
Yes.
Did you ever hear a seeker say to you something that their life had been changed by their experience in the temple?
Judge, it's hearsay because she's telling the answer to give to her.
Sustained.
How do I do that? You probably talked to thousands of seekers over the 2.5 years you were with the temple. Would that be about right?
Yes.
At least a couple thousand. Half of them, maybe.
I would say.
Yeah. So in that sense, you're an expert witness on what seekers say, because you were on the phone with them quite a bit. You also would meet, I'm sorry, go ahead. Is that yes?
Yes.
And then you would also occasionally meet them in the hallways and talk to them as they arrive or talk to them as they exit the temple.
Yes.
In your opinion, let's speak about the seekers who were coming back on a regular basis. People we might call temple men. We considered them kind of members, patrons, supporters, because they came to see us regularly. We had a group of men that fit that category. Is that true?
Yes.
Okay. So of the people who were coming back, did you ever hear any reasons why they were coming back to temple?
Objection, hearsay, beyond the scope of the jury questions.
Sustained.
The temple seeker form asks the seeker to expect no sexual gratification for money. And yet we knew that this energetic shift was what was happening at the temple. In your experience as the temple mother, so the question is something about sexual gratification for money. What is your understanding of what the donations were given to the temple for? What was your understanding of what the donations were for?
Time with the goddess, healing time, regardless of what the ceremony, any particular ceremony was.
And do you recall that women have a different, ever hearing that either in classes or from the practitioners, that when a woman releases, frequently it's from her heart and not her root?
Yes.
And so the word release in temple could mean an emotional release.
Absolutely.
Could mean an energetic release. It could mean an energetic release from not just the red ray, but from other parts of the energy system.
Yes.
So the outside world views the word orgasm, or sorry, let's just go with sexual gratification. That's the jury question. Could you speak to sexual gratification versus a personal nova, an energy shift, a chakra rebalancing? Because on the outside, someone would say there's an orgasm happening there. This one is sexual gratification. This one is energy balancing. Would you speak to the difference in how temples saw that?
Object to foundation, Judge. She didn't do any sessions.
Staying without more foundation.
Your Honor, Ms. Craven, Mrs. Craven, as far as I know, received at least one couples ceremony, which she has testified to already. And I believe that she went into chambers with her partner on at least one ceremony. Is that, did you ever go into ceremony with your partner?
Yes.
So she has received a couple ceremonies. She has gone in as a partner with her partner receiving from a practitioner. She also was the frontline counselor, cheerleader, advisor for all of these practitioners when they would come out of their ceremonies. I think.
So what's the question? Ask the question.
Okay. Is there a difference between sexual release and energy rebalancing as the temple side?
Yes. To my understanding, yes.
And it directly correlates to how many chakras are involved.
It could correlate to many things, including how many chakras were involved.
Would you agree that the temple would view sexual gratification as just a red ray experience, just the red rays involved if you're getting sexually gratified?
I would agree, yes.
And then if the orange ray is involved, you're getting mother love for the body.
Yes.
And if the yellow ray is involved, you're being witnessed as a worthy, wonderful human.
Yes.
And if the green ray is involved, you're receiving unconditional love.
Yes.
And if the practitioner is kind, they may elicit your soul truth. You may be able to speak your truth to this person.
Yes.
And that makes them a soul advisor.
Yes.
And in some cases, people may even pray as they go into ceremony, which is reaching for the divine with the third eye.
Yes.
Okay. So sexual gratification and a temple energy exchange are not the same thing. Do you agree?
It'd be two very different things.
So it's true that the practitioners, the female practitioners, were there as a magnetic grounding influence for the man's positive electricity.
Yes.
And we also would provide a strong personal and private witness to the energy in his body. We are privately witnessing what's happening with his energy.
Yes.
And it's true that not all the men that sought out temple ceremonies had too much red ray. Some of them were experiencing no energy in the red ray. Do you agree there were people who had ED?
Yes.
So people were seeking us out, too much energy in the red ray. Other men might seek us out because they'd lost the energy of the red ray.
Yes.
So a temple ceremony is more than just the power of the roots, and it's more than pleasure. We are basically inviting someone to move the energy up through the ladder of light.
Yes.
And it guides the practitioners are doing that while they're in ceremony with their energy.
Objection, foundation.
Sustained.
Do you agree that the temple's sacred attitude helps take away shame for our temple members?
Yes.
And that the temple's attitude and atmosphere countered ignorance because we provided knowledge?
Yes.
Another three questions spoke to, did you notify Tracy when someone didn't leave money, didn't leave a donation? And you said there was no reason to, it was just a normal policy, some people don't give money. Do you recall that?
Yes.
So the temple, the entire temple community understood that we existed through people giving to us.
Yes.
And what percentage if any, of the temple's private ceremonies and classes had an actual price tag that you had to pay?
The only ones I recall that we were more adamant about, although not 100%, were the certification classes. It's the classes that actually produced a certificate of completion. We tried to have all of the practitioners pay, all of the class members pay for those certificates.
Because they were using those certifications and courses to build towards something, just like at a university or a college or...
Yes.
And then we had some Tantra teachers come in who had very strict policies about getting the money, collecting all the money up front, or use your credit card, or here's the payment plan.
Yes, those that came from outside temples sometimes had different policies for their classes.
So it's true to say that you could not practice at the Phoenix Goddess Temple without knowing that you may do a ceremony or a session or even a class, and you may receive no money for it. That's true, that people knew they could do things and they would receive no money for it.
Correct.
And so it's also true to say people operated in faith and hope.
Yes.
Okay, and then there was another witness question about using fake names to hide identity. Isn't it true that we invited people to create a name that helped them step outside of their worldly identity?
Yes.
That was the primary goal.
Yes.
Was to shed everything and step into, perhaps you might say, an alternate version of yourself.
Yes.
Be Superman for a day.
Yes.
We had people declare themselves to be King Tut and Joan Namath. Do you agree?
Yes.
So people would frequently embrace this and have a lot of fun and pleasure from using a temple name.
Yes.
And then there were some temple members, temple men and women, who just wanted to be known as themselves.
Yes.
They just used their real name.
Yes.
And there were many seekers who used their real name.
Yes.
They just say, this is Tom, this is, yeah. So that was entirely voluntary to use the temple name or your real name.
Yes.
And many people did use their real name.
Yes.
And many people felt comfortable giving their real phone number to the temple.
Yes.
And some people did not because they needed discretion for work or family relating. They needed discretion.
Sure.
Temple encouraged every seeker to bring their partner, their families, to come and take part in the temple for more than just ceremonies.
Yes.
Was it your experience that many of the temple seekers did in fact flow into other programs?
There were quite a few that did join us for our high holy days and ceremonies and classes, yes.
And it's possible some were also referred to Sunday services. They were told about all of that.
Yes.
So if a person got activated about the goddess, the sacred feminine, tantra, energy, and chakras, they had many avenues after that initial ceremony to explore and discover.
Yes.
Without being asked to give any large sum of money.
Correct.
Did you believe that these other programs were an important part of the ministry so that people could grow outside of the chambers?
Objection beyond the scope of the jury question.
Sustained.
This discussion, there was I think a question here is, was there a de facto policy that seekers could be rejected if they did not pay? And you replied, no, there was no policy.
No.
Isn't it true that you would make the decision to call a seeker or not entirely based on the practitioner and what her level of upset was?
Yes.
Did you ever call a seeker because you wanted the money for temple?
No.
So when you made those calls, it was because the practitioner was standing there
Freaking out.
very distraught.
Demanding I do something, and yes, I vehemently tried to refuse.
And that was because part of the ethics are that we're there for our members, but we don't flow to them saying, hey, we need you to come and give money because we need money.
Yes.
We would not do that. So the Temple Hero, where we asked people to participate and help us, that was exceptional. That was not the norm.
Correct.
Looks like another question is, if we tell someone, if you're ashamed, maybe the temple's not for you, using a fake phone number, fake name. I think the gist of the question is, if people were ashamed, if seekers were ashamed, why did we not tell them that the temple was not a fit? If they came to us with shame.
If the seeker came to us with shame?
If the idea at temple was to get rid of shame, and then someone didn't want to give their real name, why didn't the temple then say, well, if you're in shame, you shouldn't come to temple? There's a reason I'm trying to answer this. Get us an answer. Is what I'm saying making sense?
Next question, Ms. Liz.
Thank you. Okay. Yeah. So one of the questions is, if they asked for sexual services or implied they wanted sex on the phone, did you just send them to the website? Or did you also talk to them about no guarantees? Or was it both? I'll break that down because it looks like more than one question. So if someone's asking directly for a sexual service on the phone, or they implied they wanted sex on the phone, did you just send them to the website, or did you also warn them there were no guarantees? If they were trying to say, will she have sex with me on the phone? Would you just send them away to the website, or would you also say something more?
Yes, we would absolutely tell them there were no guarantees of any particular anything happening, sexual or otherwise. It was entirely between the energetic that was created between the healer and the practitioner, what specific type of healing that the seeker was looking for, as to what type of ceremony, what type of energetic would show up. How the session went was completely dependent on the magnetics at the time and the energies at the time. As far as somebody saying they wanted a particular sexual act and my sending them to the website, doesn't feel like that would have been necessarily the appropriate response, rather than just speaking to them about what Temple provided. So I might ask them if they had read the website, you know, that type of thing. It wouldn't have been an automatic response, oh, go read the website.
So it's true to say that the gatekeeper wasn't just a sales desk, as might be implied by the state. There was an actual screening process. There was a gate, and the gatekeepers were allowing people in or sort of sending people away.
Yes.
Did you feel it was your job to keep people who weren't a good match out of Temple?
Yes.
And that was to protect the practitioners because they're in a vulnerable moment when they're doing their work.
Certainly.
So you actually are in the front lines of making sure that the gatekeeping ministry then, the phones and emails, is about creating a good match that's a good experience for all parties.
Yes, if there was a seeker that was disrespectful with me on the phone or continued to demand some type of guarantee, wasn't taking any of the conversation that I was having or disrespectful, I would absolutely tell them that Temple was not the place for them.
I'm not sure that's true. This is a jury question right here. Was that one of three questions? Yeah, I don't think it is either.
I had another thought on that. May I?
We'll wait for a question.
Okay.
I do have another, okay. 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 There was a jury question about, did the healers have any degrees? Did anyone have degrees in abuse? And you said, I'm not aware of any degrees. Does that sound right? Just
Not specific degrees, no.
But you do agree there were people practicing in the building who were certified by the Sedona School of Temple Arts?
Yes.
And there were people in the building certified by Source School of Tantra, Charles Muir?
Yes.
There were people certified in the building by certified graduates of the Divine Feminine Awakened Masculine Institute?
Yes.
There were people who had been trained with Dr. Karina Clark of GoddessTemple.com.
Yes.
Which is very similar to us in that it's goddess worship in the body.
Yes.
You agree? And do you recall if anyone was certified in Jade Lotus Tantra? Radha may have.
I was going to say that sounds familiar, and I was thinking Magdalena.
And then we had
that
people.
Was the Jade Egg.
Okay. And then we had a number of graduates from the Southwest Institute for the Healing Arts.
Yes.
And we had one woman who was a medical doctor, Olivia. Remember Olivia Kay? Who was an actual MD. She was a cosmetic MD. She worked just briefly one summer of 2011, I believe. That must have been 10. She was a cosmetic doctor, and she
Judge, she's testifying.
Sustained. Sustained.
I remember Olivia, yes.
Okay. And do you recall what her other job was?
Besides the skin and the...
She was doing cosmetics. She would come in and do Botox for the ladies and things like that. Do you remember that?
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you meant separate from the skin. Yes.
Anyway, and then there was another woman who was a graduate and a sexologist from the Institute for the Advanced Study of Human Sexuality.
Yes.
So there actually were people with certificates in graduate trainings in the Phoenix Goddess Temple.
Absolutely.
And we're speaking of practitioners now, not the teachers.
Correct.
And how would you know if the women there were really healed? And you said I would have to take their word for it. Does that sound right?
Yes.
Now, there would be other indicators that they were being healed. Would you occasionally notice that when a woman came out of a healing or a class, her spirits had been raised? She was in a better mood.
Yes.
She was more confident in life.
Yes.
She felt empowered to tackle her problems.
Yes.
She felt like she could set a goal and Temple would help her achieve her goal.
Yes.
That the women would come out of a sister circle and go off into the night planning ways they could help each other.
Yes.
Some of the women perhaps became calmer, more peaceful, because their life situation settled down.
Yes.
Approach, please. Please, you've been following up on these questions for an hour and 20 minutes. It only took 15 minutes to ask the questions in the first place. So
I apologize, Your Honor. I can stop. I was trying to be complete with her so as not to call her back.
Well, I think that that's everyone's goal here, is that you don't have to call her back. But questions and follow-up are supposed to be limited to clarifying anything that the witness said that you think needs to be clarified.
In the jury.
It's not to repeat her testimony from before or to
Okay.
expand on her testimony.
Okay. All right. I think I'm at the end anyway, so.
Regarding the question about paying taxes on your income, isn't it true that for the time that you were at the Phoenix Goddess Temple, that you did not make more than $10,000 from any one gift?
Absolutely.
And that there were times that the amount of money that the year the temple closed, the temple actually owed you money.
Yes.
There was a question about other temples where goddess temples or tantric temples where sexual acts occurred, and using the Orange County Goddess Temple as an example, that there's no sexual teachings for men at that temple. But it is true that the Sedona Temple had quite a focus on integrated sexuality and consciousness.
Yes, that is true.
And the GoddessTemple.com, which was the network of goddess women, Karina Clark, GoddessTemple.com, those are all sacred sexual goddess practitioners.
Yes.
That's their focus.
Yes.
And it's true that Dr. Sasha and Janet Lesson of the All Chakra Temple in Maui are also focused on integrating root energy in healing. So they do sacred sexuality.
Yes.
And our guest, Athena Goldenfire from the Tantra Temple in Denver, she also was doing sex consciousness and healing.
Yes.
And one of our own practitioners, Debbie Ma, was doing a goddess temple in Topanga Canyon in California. Did she ever show you that website?
I apologize. Topanga what?
Topanga Canyon. Goddess Debbie Ma was launching her own goddess temple that did sacred sexuality ceremonies.
Okay.
So there are other temples, Tantra and goddess temples, that do focus on sacred sexuality.
Yes.
And the Phoenix Goddess Temple is not the only one.
Yes.
There was a question about whether there was any erotic touch or sex acts. Oh, I'm sorry, skip that one. The classes, and you said there could have been. There was a question about why you didn't attend Sunday services, and you answered that your family was your church on the weekends. That was your focus. Isn't it true that you built an altar to the mother in your home?
Yes.
And isn't it true that you also invested in a massage table / altar of light to do anointing and touch with your partner?
Yes.
And isn't it also true that you, your daughter, your husband, son, and their partners attended some of the High Holy Day celebrations?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Mrs. Craven. Namaste.
Thank you.
All right, you may step down.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here. The state may call its next witness.
Your Honor, state recalls Detective Michael Campbell.
Please come forward. Take the stand. Are still under oath. Do you understand?
Yes, I do.
And Your Honor, if I may have just a moment.
Certainly.
This is it. Yes, I know those. You were okay. What do you need to do?
Yeah, I'm sure it's fine. Yeah, that's also the other.
Your Honor, parties have reached stipulation as to the following exhibits and entering them into evidence. Exhibit 184, Exhibit 230.
Is that correct, Ms. Lee? Should you stipulate? You stipulate to the admission of those exhibits?
Yes, Your Honor.
Exhibit 184 and 230 are admitted.
Morning,
Morning.
Last time we testified last year, we had begun to discuss, I believe, you and Detective Williams interview conversation that you had with Tamara Purcell. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Now, I think as we previously discussed, that specific recording, along with other recordings, is because of the technology 4 years ago, where that specific recording device was kept. The audio is not great. Is that right?
It's not great to be played in an environment like this, correct?
But that audio tape now is an evidence that you've been able to listen to that in sort of on a laptop or whatever, and you're able to make out the conversation you had with the markers.
Yes, I have.
Now, Detective, during that meeting with Tamara Purcell, were some documents given to you specifically by Ms. Purcell?
Yes, she provided us with a packet, like a blue folder, and it contained the practitioner. It was a practitioner handbook is what it was called. And then there were also a couple of loose documents, including a new sister duo sign-off sheet, a marketing agreement, an outline of the training and next step process.
Now, and I think maybe with Ms. Craven's testimony, there was a practitioner packet that is it Janet's copy or Janet, something to that effect. Is that right?
Yes, that's exactly what was given to us.
Okay, so what the jury has seen in terms of the practitioner handbook that was Janet's is the same thing that you received.
Yes, correct.
First one, Ms.
Yes.
Detective, I'm showing you Exhibit 170. If you want to just take a look at what's in there. Oh, thank you. Is what contained in Exhibit 170 the packet that you received and the assorted documents from Ms. Purcell on May 26, 2011 when you went to the temple?
Yes, that's correct.
It was Exhibit 170.
Any objection to Exhibit 170? 170 is admitted.
Detective, in your conversation with Ms. Brewster, did you indicate specifically what your, not your background as a detective, but what your background was in coming to the temple and the persona that you had adopted?
Yes. I went into the temple in an undercover persona as somebody who worked as an escort and primarily doing out-call work, meaning I go to the customers' houses, hotels, whatever. I would see them in their places. And I indicated that it had been about a year since I had advertised online, but that I had a group of regular customers that I maintained relationships with and that I continued to see.
Now, and I don't want to tread into any area that we've already discussed, but can you briefly talk about why you adopted that specific persona? Was there a rationale, or just said, this is what I'll do?
No, Detective Herman and I went into the temple together, and she went in as an individual that had no background in the escort world, and that's what she was comfortable portraying, and I wanted to portray somebody that went in as an escort just to see between the two of us, we're in the same conversation, same day, if there was going to be any difference in how we were received. If somebody that didn't come from that background, like Detective Herman, was going to be more well received than somebody like myself who was still working as an escort, and that's why we chose different personas.
Now, upon beginning that discussion with Ms. Brewster specifically, that, hey, I have this escorting background, did you then have a conversation with Ms. Brewster about what actually happened at the temple in terms of the sessions?
Yeah, Ms. Brewster had a practitioner questionnaire, I believe is what it was called, and there were specific questions on the questionnaire that were asked of us, and she had both of our questionnaires set out, and she was asking us line by line each of those questions and was filling in the blanks. And then as she was asking questions, dependent upon our responses, she was providing her own, I guess, just some of her own background and experiences within the temple. So she began to share with us some of the things that she did during her sessions and kind of what her background was.
Okay, so Ms. Brewster did indicate that in whatever capacity, and I know there's been some disagreement from Ms. Elise about what Ms. Brewster's specific role was in the temple, but she did indicate to you that she was actually doing some of the sessions. Is that right?
That is correct. She indicated she was a practitioner, and she also indicated that she had known Ms. Elise for 7 years and worked with her previously, or worked together in Seattle, and that she had left for 3 years and had come back to the Phoenix Goddess Temple 2 months prior to our conversation, and that she was part of she referred to it as the inner core and the inner circle. Tracy, Janet, and Tamara, those are the three that she considered the inner core or the inner circle. She used both those terms.
And we'll perhaps get to this in a little more after lunch, but at least during this period of time, May 26, 2011, when you were in contact with Ms. Brewster in terms of making arrangements to come and work at the temple, is that right?
I'm not sure exactly what your question was, but yes, May 26, 2011 was the day that we were there in the temple, and we had conversations on the telephone leading up to our visit in temple.
And I should have done a better job of explaining, but Ms. Elise has indicated through some of her questions that she, either her nor Janet Quick, were around during this period of time. Did you meet with them during, you or Detective Herman, during the period when you were interviewing to get a job with them?
We did not meet with either Janet or Tracy, and we had initially contacted Tamara Brewster after the meetup session that we had on May 6th. So it went from May 6th, we met her initially, and then May 26th, so 20 days later, is when we actually sat down with her and interviewed with her.
In that intervening 20 days, did you you have any phone conversations, email contact with either Tracy Elise or Janet Craven?
I did not.
Subsequent to the meeting, after you met with Tamara, was there some email and contact with Ms. Elise?
Yes, there was one email that she sent to me, as well as Janet sent emails as well.
Referring to what Ms. Brusso was actually doing at the temple, she talked to you, she indicated she was a practitioner. You know, through the course of the investigation, she was at least doing some fill-in, gatekeeping work, is that right?
Yeah, she was a gatekeeper in the afternoons, she mentioned to us, and she also said that she does various administrative tasks as needed, and she was a practitioner herself.
In examining the various documents we found at the temple, was previously a breakdown of various people who were working at the temple at any given period of time, is that right?
Yes,
or
correct.
The name, I think we've seen one where Miss Elise was referred to as temple priestess or something to that effect.
Like Mother High Priestess or something to that effect, yes.
Similarly, Janet Craven was her temple mother, something along those lines. In some of those documents that you found, where was Tamara Brusso? Was she listed on those documents?
She was listed on the website as a practitioner, but she was listed on a phone contact sheet as a, without it in front of me, I can't say for certain, but it was the same title that Janet Craven had. I believe it was Mother Priestess or Mother High Priestess, something to that effect.
I haven't discussed Sedona much, but in some of the documents that you found referenced a Sedona temple was Tamara Brusso talked about in the hierarchy of some Sedona temple?
Tamara Brusso was a gatekeeper in Sedona as well, and she was in Sedona often with Miss Elise, and so we believe that she was also involved, well, we know she was involved, at least in the hiring process, because she interviewed another female detective who responded to a Backpage ad for more girls in Sedona. And so when that ad was posted looking for girls and the phone number was called, it was Tamara Brusso who was arranged to meet that undercover detective in Sedona as well and interviewed her.
And when was that, if you remember?
It was on August 24th, 2011.
So outside of the period of time in which Miss Elise has referenced her and Miss Craven were on vacation or something like that?
That's correct.
Now, in the conversation where Ms. Bruce was talking about her specific experiences with people coming to the temple, did she talk about whether or not there was a sexual act or sexual acts as a part of this?
Yeah, she gave us 3 different examples, and again, this was just in response to the question and answering back and forth. She just volunteered information about her experience. She let us know about one session that she had with a gentleman where she used humming and toning on his wand of light, which she later clarified was the penis, where using this toning and humming technique, he was brought to his personal nova, which we knew to be orgasm, and then she said she laid her hand on his heart at the end of the session to provide him with love. She told us about that session. She told us about another gentleman that she saw 2 times a week who was married, but his wife wouldn't allow him to look at her vagina, so he would come to the temple to see her and to see Tamara during her sessions, and he would literally, she described it as pulling apart her yoni as if a doctor would to look for ticks, and that was so that he could just see the woman's anatomy because his wife didn't allow him to look at her vagina. And then she also told us about some body sliding that she does, nude body sliding, and she talked about putting her nipple into an opening and how it brings people close together. So those are 3 different instances where she talks specifically about contact, sexual contact.
Detective, during this, and I know in your capacity as a detective, you had made an effort to learn a lot of the terms, but for the purposes of this meeting, did you clarify with Ms. Brusso what this term meant, or what this wand of light, for example, or yoni, what those terms represent?
Yes, we did. We talked in plain English, common language, like blow job, hand job, that kind of thing. And then when she was talking, and she would use terms like yoni and jewels for the men's testicles and wand of light and that kind of thing, we would clarify and ask, oh, is that, was that the penis, and is that the balls, that kind of thing. We would talk just to clarify, even though we had already had an understanding just through the rest of our investigation what those terms were. We wanted her to tell us. And then there were times where we would talk and I would refer to my customers as clients, and she would be quick to say, no, that's a seeker here. Or she would, tell me if, like I asked specifically on 3 different occasions, she mentioned that there was a glossary of terms, and I asked specifically, could I have that glossary so that I'm not using inappropriate language in the temple? And then that was ultimately provided to me in an email later.
Your persona was that you were someone who generally did outcalls. And again, outcalls in the escort world are where the escort agrees to meet with John in like a hotel room or somewhere away from like a permanent establishment.
That's correct. Not in my home, not in my establishment, but wherever he sees fit.
Now, and you represented this Ms. Russo.
Yes.
Was there a discussion that you had with her about outcall versus what they did at the temple, and what the temple's intentions or beliefs were regarding outcall?
Yeah, I asked her if the women in the temple were allowed to practice both within the temple and do outcalls as well, meaning see customers outside of the confines of that building. And she said that there were some women that did, and that the temple was trying to get away from that because they wanted to just make sure that the women were doing the same thing they wanted to make sure that what was being done outside the temple was mirrored the practices inside the temple. But she said that there were some people that had still been doing that and that they were trying to get away from it.
Now, again, you were undercover capacity. Did you question Ms. Russo about the legality, given that there was discussion of sex acts? There's certainly a money component. Was that part of the discussion with Ms. Russo?
Yeah, she actually early on brought up that the local law she just made a comment in passing, something about the local law, and so we asked questions specifically about that, and she said that she made a comment that the local law had come in and done an undercover article and kind of talked about that, which we assumed she meant the New Times article. And so we specifically asked about the legality of what was going on, and did she have concerns, or should we have concerns about practicing there? And because we told her we were law-abiding citizens and we'd never been in trouble with the police. And she indicated that what they were doing was legal because you have to not talk about the sex act in the session. She said that the gatekeeper would be providing on the telephone the suggested donation, and that we were not to talk about money at all during the session, and that we were to not talk about what we were going to be doing, no sexual talk in the session. And so then I said, so you just do it? And she said, yes.
So at least the way the conversation occurred, Ms. Russo certainly was of the belief that some of the actions put in place by Ms. Elite and taught in her theory practice class somehow would alleviate any sort of legal responsibility.
She indicated that she didn't believe what they were doing was illegal specifically because of the way the money and the no talk was set up.
Just to clarify something, Ms. Russo seemed to be under the belief that there had been some undercover investigation. As far as your investigation and talking to other agencies, has there ever been any other undercover operations done in the Phoenix Goddess Temple that was set up in 24th Street Province?
There was not.
As far as you understand, Scottsdale Police Department, the FBI or the Phoenix Police Department prior again to the New Times article coming out never did any undercover investigations or examinations of what went on in sessions at the temple?
Never.
During your conversation with Ms. Brusso, was there a discussion specifically about how the money worked in terms of how money was left and then what was to happen with that money once it was left by agency?
Yeah, we had the handbook in front of us, and we had an opportunity before she started interviewing us see the financial breakdown in the handbook, and she referred to the handbook. But she did talk, we were talking about some classes, and she did mention that your first 33 hours in session you would be tithing more to the temple, and that was because you would be paying for some of the classes that we would be taking. But yes, she indicated that the money was to be left in the room. She didn't say specifically where in the room, but it needed to be left in the room. She emphasized that, never take it from the seeker directly, that they would be leaving it in the room. And then she explained that part of that money would be then turned around and tied to the temple.
Now, did Ms. Russo refer to the money strictly as a donation, or did she sometimes refer to this conversation as a fee?
I know we were using the term fee and money a lot. Without referring to my specific notes, I can't tell you exactly how many times or when she did or when she, how she referred to it. I just know that we talked as if it was a fee. We said fee, we said money. It was never, that part was never corrected of us.
As opposed to situations where you would say client and she would correct to seeker.
Correct.
Now, in this conversation about how we want to refer to the money that was left by the seekers, was there a discussion or specific information given by Ms. Russo about the length of the session and how that corresponded with whatever money was left?
Yeah, she made a comment that Tracy believes that you could be more mutual in a 90-minute session, but she said she personally didn't share that same belief. She indicated Tracy believed that a 60-minute session would be just a plain whole-body healing session, and you could be more mutual in a 90-minute session. But Tamara said that she didn't share those same beliefs, that she does more than whole-body healing in a 60-minute session.
Was there, as you were getting into the specific path that you would take to become a practitioner, was there a discussion of whatever the first step would be in terms of receiving a healing from another practitioner that you would receive?
Yes, she. They gave us this goddess orientation timeline, and it spells out specifically what happens. You do an interview, then you select a big sister, then you do a receiving. It goes through. We'd heard from Mead Rose on May 6th when we'd been in there for that meetup session. We had heard that he had said we would do a receive, and then again when we met up with Tamara Brusso, she said the next step in the process was to have a receiving session so that we could feel how wonderful it was to actually receive a session. So we understood that was going to be the next step in the process.
Detective, did you understand that receiving session, that there would be some sexual touching as a part of it?
I absolutely believe that was the case. Yes.
The goddess orientation timeline that you're referring to, this was again from Exhibit 170, the pattern that Ms. Russo gave you, correct?
That's correct.
Now, there's like 8 days described for the process to become a practitioner. And did you understand the process to go from nothing to doing solo sessions?
That's correct.
Okay. Was there any discussion with Ms. Brusso about whether or not this is what would have to happen before you could actually begin to do solo sessions?
She said we would have to go through all of the steps, but she said that the next time that we attended, she said we didn't have to actually wait 8 days to go through these steps. That's how it's written on the sheet. But she said that the next time that we came back, she wanted us to have clothes to take pictures. She wanted us to have clothes to do a receiving session. And she said that we would immediately be placed on the temple. We would meet Miss Elise. And she said that we would be, our pictures would be published on their temple website immediately. And she said that we could even start doing sessions when we came back. Like the day we came back, we could literally start new sister duos as long as we had been through the theory of practice class. And according to this paperwork, the theory of practice class was about 2 to 2.5 hours. And then after that class was done and our receiving was done and our pictures were taken, then we could start right away with new sister duos, and that's where we would gain a better understanding of what whole body healing was about.
You mentioned that you believe that that very first
Session with another practitioner that you would do, you believe would include some sexual touching. Why do you believe that?
Because she kept talking about, she made references to the fact that we would feel how wonderful it is to get this energetic release. And we'd been hearing about this release throughout, you know, in different contexts. And a release was a sexual release, some kind of orgasm or something. And we couldn't go in there as a undercover and somebody who does escort out-call work and not be nude on a table. That was my personal opinion. I couldn't say that I was an escort and see various men and then not get naked on a table for my own receive healing session, which is why we didn't continue with the process.
And again, just to remind you, the specific reason is those are hard and fast rules and protocols put in place by the police department and what a vice detective or officer can and cannot do in an undercover capacity.
Correct. It would be a violation of our policy.
One other point about your meeting with Ms. Brusso, or specifically, where Ms. Brusso, your meeting was such that, as you understood at the time, she was a representative or representing the Phoenix Goddess Temple, correct?
That's correct. And she had mentioned to us that she had talked to Tracy about us already, and Tracy was really excited to have us start working right away because they talked about our great energy, and so it was my belief that Tracy had knowledge that we were coming in for this meeting and that they had spoken about us.
You did say subsequent to your meeting with Ms. Brusso, you began doing some emailing with Ms. Brusso, is that correct?
Yes, I emailed the temple asking for the glossary of terms. Tamara responded. I also received an email from Janet, and the email I received from Tracy was an invitation to a Priestess Path upcoming training.
The email from Janet, when did that occur approximately?
It occurred a couple of weeks after we had our meeting with Tamara.
Beyond the role of the temple, in many of the ads for, you said Ms. Brusso was listed as a practitioner, which would be, did you see her in some of the Backpage ads in your investigation?
Yes, she appeared in several Backpage ads, and most of her postings were actually with Miss Elise. The two of them were posted often in Sedona and in Phoenix together.
Now, is there any discussion with Ms. Brusso about what your obligations would be, you as an escort would be in terms of adopting whatever the religious practices of the temple were?
We talked about the religious aspects and let her know that we didn't have that, something that we were interested in exploring. But she said they don't have religion, they're spiritual, and was drawing a distinction between religion and spiritual, but didn't say anything more than that.
Now, again, during some of the questions, Ms. Elise has referenced that Ms. Brusso wasn't necessarily, things that she said were not representative of the Temple. If you could sort of, in your capacity as a case agent, was the interview that happened with Ms. Brusso similar or dissimilar to the interview Detective Bill had with Janet Craven?
I think the interview that we had with Ms. Brusso was very similar to the one that Detective now Dee Coufflet had with Janet Craven, except that Janet did not appear as sincere in those beliefs as Tamara did. So I looked at Tamara as somebody that had known her longer and that, you know, was living. She actually lived in the temple, and I looked at her as somebody that actually had more conviction with what goes on there than Janet did.
Speaking about now Detective Dee Coufflet's interview with Janet Craven, that occurred in August of 2011?
That's correct.
Detective, why, as the person who was least making a lot of decisions in this case, after you already met with Ms. Brusso, did you decide to send in or talk with Detective Bill about her doing an undercover, not an undercover deal, but going undercover with Ms. Craven?
So when we first started this process in May in meeting with the individuals inside the temple as females attempting to gain employment, we didn't come right in as escort all the way. We don't care about any of this tantra, goddess stuff, because we honestly thought we would be shut down immediately if we did that. And so Amanda, Detective Herman, went in with the understanding that, you know, she had none of that background. I went in with, I do escort out calls. I've done it for a year but haven't posted. And then we thought, well, geez, can we be successful just going in as a straight out escort? This is what I do. I don't have any religion. I don't care about the religious aspect, to see if it would work. And so that's why we upped it when Detective Dee Coufflet went in. We just had her go in as a straight-up escort with no religious background, just to see what would happen.
Sort of, at least the thought process was these three strands: someone with no escort background, someone with some escort background, someone who was currently working doing mass prostitution. Those would be the three.
That's correct.
That's good stuff.
All right, we'll take the evening recess, ladies and gentlemen. Please return at 1:25. We will start promptly at 1:30. Please remember the admonition. Have a nice lunch. On the record.
Tracy, if
Please be seated. The record will show the presence of the jury, the defendant, and counsel. Mr. Leiter, you may continue with direct examination. Do we need some paper towels over there? Well, if you need something, let's let Randy know. We'll take care of it. All right, you may proceed.
May 26, 2011, we briefly referenced in that conversation you talked about how tight you are and not the way to go back to temple. Did you represent yourself or yourself as people who were interested in maybe, at least part of the reason that it's to make money.
Yes. In fact, I actually brought up the fact that we had met with her on the 6th, and she had told us we could make really good money, and I reiterated again that we were happy that we could make really good money in the temple, and she said that we could.
Did you get a sense of what really good money?
She did say that she could make $2,000 a week, and she also said somebody like Venus has 5 sessions in a given day, or has had 5 sessions in a given day, and so she indicated that that would be really good money.
Now, certainly something that's been our was there any reference in discussion about what happens if a guy doesn't make money? They get about 4 conversations about it.
Yeah, we actually asked her what happens, like what do we do if somebody doesn't leave us money, and she actually indicated that it's very, very rare. She said once in a while you do get gypped, but it's not something that happens often, and she indicated it had only happened one time since she'd been there, since she'd been back in Arizona, and she said that they were really good about remembering who doesn't leave money.
When you say we, what did you take it as? Who's this good remembering when people
It was in the context of the gatekeepers.
You said that it only happened for one, so she was aware of it since she'd be better than that. What was your understanding at that point about how long Margaret said it did that, working or helping out?
She indicated she was in Phoenix at one point, and then she'd left for 3 years, and then she'd been back in Temple for 2 months. She had, again, we were at the end of May, and she said she'd been back there for 2 months, and as she could recall, it happened one time.
Now, I asked a question before lunch, specifically about, were you aware of any investigations into the Phoenix Goddess Temple, specifically had an undercover component beyond what you did in your investigation? You said you were not aware of anything. Let me be more precise. Are you aware of any undercover extent of the investigations into the Phoenix Goddess Temple at any location that they had in Phoenix, in the Phoenix metropolitan area, including Scottsdale?
Including Scottsdale. I was aware that Scottsdale Police Department did some surveillance at the location, but never did any undercover investigation at all.
That is something that, in the capacity of being executive of Phoenix and working with the other agents, you'd be able to learn whether or not, and if not within an investigation where Scottsdale set in an undercover to try and do a deal.
Yeah, we have good working relationships with the other agencies, and so I've seen some of the surveillance notes and things that Scottsdale had previously done. But again, it was just limited to surveillance. Same as our previous 2009, I believe, case where Detective Chance just started doing surveillance.
Not to get into a comparison of cities or agencies or that sort of thing, but does Scottsdale have
They have one person that works human trafficking cases, but they certainly didn't have any kind of an undercover vice unit. Now they have some people, I believe, that could potentially do undercover, but that's just been within the last few months that was instituted.
So as of 2008, 2009, 2010, Scottsdale, Scottsdale Police Department didn't have the ability to do the type of investigation that you did in the Phoenix Scottsdale investigation.
That's correct. They did not have a dedicated vice enforcement unit.
Now the jury has heard at some length, depending on the deal, about numerous undercover deals that were a part of your investigation. I want to just briefly understand what your rationale as a case that you're in putting into place each of those deals, starting with the Aphrodite or Rebecca Carrera.
As I previously mentioned, Detective Herman and I made the decision to set up the deal with Aphrodite, Rebecca Carrara, because of the Phoenix New Times article, and specifically what was outlined in that article. And so we had Detective Kenny go and do that deal, and we instructed him specifically prior to going in to ask about credit cards. And was that something that they accepted?
There was a deal with a practitioner named Soleil, is that right?
Yes, Soleil, Audrey Starr. She was selected to do, we selected her for a deal because she was advertising in both the Phoenix Goddess Temple on their website and in ads, and in addition was having sessions at her home, and she also used the name Megan, and so we wanted to determine whether or not the temple was allowing both in-call at the temple and then also in-call in private residences.
Just to create after I went back for you would consider that a completed deal, correct?
Correct, meaning a prostitution deal, yes.
The deal that occurred with Audrey Starr, what did you consider that in terms of value to your investigation?
We also considered that a completed prostitution deal, and we thought it was valuable in that she was making a lot of references to seeing her in her residence and also seeing her in the temple. So we believed that what her session work was like at home was indicative of what she was doing in the temple as well.
I heard from Elizabeth Ryan, a practitioner named Mary. Did you consider that?
Yes, we did consider that a completed deal, and she was chosen because we'd seen her advertised in the temple, and then we saw the shift where she was no longer advertising in the temple and she was working in her home, and her ads were a little different as far as her prices, and the Goddess Temple language was removed, so we wanted to determine, did she leave, why did she leave, or is she still doing work on the outside?
And to be fair to Louise, that Elizabeth Ryan deal occurred after she had left, was no longer kind of working with her. Is that right?
That's correct. She's indicated she was no longer at the temple at the time of that deal.
Jerry heard about the deal involving Kiahi, and what was her name?
Kiahi is Darlene Wellingham, and Kiahi was selected by Detective Herman and myself for our deal because she had been advertising pretty provocatively on several different websites, all connected to the Phoenix Goddess Temple, but she was wearing clothing that was very representative of what we see on Backpage, and she was also in session a lot, meaning she was advertised as, she was on Backpage a lot for sessions. So we selected her for another deal inside the temple, and we specifically had Detective Cotto go inside with that, for that deal with only $20 to see, is this really donation-based, or how does that look and how does that work?
Now, there's been some mention of the Sedona Temple. There was a concurrent investigation that was going on in Sedona Temple at the same time as you were conducting your investigation, is that correct?
Yes, but the Sedona investigation was also by us. We just involved a detective from Sedona PD, but we saw that the Phoenix Goddess Temple started advertising in Sedona. The practitioners that were advertising in Sedona were coming from the Phoenix Goddess Temple and migrating between two locations. And Sedona, at that Sedona Temple location, it specifically said we were opening a Sedona Temple and they were hiring for girls, or hiring is probably not the word she used, but they were looking for girls to become practitioners there in Sedona. And again, the pictures, the practitioners were the same.
Objections noted, overruled. You may continue.
And Detective, you would agree with me that just because there were acts of prostitution, negotiated prostitution deals and stuff, that doesn't mean the Phoenix Goddess Temple is, that doesn't necessarily mean the Phoenix Goddess Temple is doing acts of prostitution at the Phoenix Goddess Temple, correct?
Sorry, I don't know that I understand your question.
Let me clarify. What was the purpose in using, why did you do this in undercover deals, and how were they used for investigation?
We went to Sedona and set up a couple of prostitution or calls, meetings with seekers and practitioners because we wanted to determine had they branched out and were there other locations that we needed to be investigating. We knew that Miss Elise lived in Sedona, and we knew that there was a Sedona temple that many of the practitioners were going back and forth to, so we knew that they were related, and we wanted to determine what that relationship was.
There were two separate deals that were set up in Sedona, correct?
That is correct.
Let's talk about the deal with detectives.
Yes, Detective Kuhn, that was they went in for a couple session, and that was with Danetta Motley Smith, who uses the name Star, who also worked in the Phoenix Goddess Temple. And they set up a couple session and got a prostitution deal with her for $400 for the two women. It was going to be like a couple and her, and the two women were going to engage in oral sex on each other for that $400.
There was another detective who attempted an undercover deal with the practitioner Debbie Ma, is that correct?
Here in Phoenix, yes.
And was that what you would consider? So I think everything you've referenced up to this point were what you as an investigator call completed deals, correct?
That's correct.
Now, the Debbie Ma deal with, what was the name of the detective?
It was Detective Murray.
Was that a completed deal or
The deal with Debbie Ma, who uses the name Debbie Ma, she's actually Holly Alsop, that was at a hotel here in Phoenix, and it was not a completed deal insofar as offering sex for money. She took a shower there in his room, came out in a see-through lingerie outfit, and refused to talk about what they were going to do, just wanted to do it, and was very forthcoming with actually the act, so much so that the officer had to end their interaction so as not to violate any policies, but she wouldn't talk about what they were going to do, so that's why it was not considered a completed prostitution deal.
Is what happened between Detective Murray and Debbie Ma, is that rare in connection investigations?
It's not rare for people that have been around the block a while, insofar as getting arrested for prostitution, as Debbie Ma had. She was actually somebody we selected because of her prior prostitution arrest that we knew about, and so we selected her. Plus, she was advertising both in the temple and she was doing out calls at the time, and so he called her phone number directly and set the date up directly with her. But she'd been arrested for prostitution a couple of times prior to that, so it wasn't a shock or a surprise to us when she wouldn't actually discuss the sex acts.
In your experience, oftentimes individuals who have been involved in prostitution laws are more careful in trying to figure out law enforcement efforts.
Absolutely, and I think the longer somebody's engaged in this lifestyle, the more careful they are.
Was there one other Sedona you mentioned? Was there one other completed Sedona?
Yeah, there was. The detectives actually scheduled a deal with an individual by the name of Luna. She didn't show up for the deal, but Debbie Ma, the same Debbie Ma we just spoke of, Holly Alsop, agreed to come up for the deal, and she drove up from Phoenix, and it was a completed prostitution deal with her and the detective, where she told him she would provide him with an orgasm, and that was for $200.
So at this point, detecting your investigation, when all the,
correct. That was the very last deal that we planned, and again, that was on September 1st, just less than a week before we served the search warrants at the location. And we just gave Detective Gilbrath the instruction to be very forward. And we've already listened to his testimony, so I'm not going to go into that, but we just said be very forward and direct and see what happens.
Why was Ms. Lee specifically selected for
As the leader of the organization, it was our interest in determining if the way she operated was similar as the other individuals involved with this organization.
was Marcella Baker as well as Jim Perry, is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
There's been a number of questions, both sailors, this was about how the gatekeepers conducted, how they spoke on the phone to tenants.
Yes.
But I wanted to, and this is Lisa's reference, that the gatekeepers were careful not to make any guarantees or promises about what sexual acts would occur. Was that the experience that you learned in your investigation, or is that the opposite?
That was very consistent throughout in all of the interviews that we've done. It's been very consistent in saying that they always would say there's no guarantee.
Now, comparing that to other types of investigations where you as an investigator or other detective were called on a member on backpage, is how the guys, specifically the gatekeepers, operate in terms of their phone conversations? Is that similar to what you've seen out of the escort world?
I've had the opportunity to be part of a lot of investigations involving individuals along with, criminal enterprise type investigations, and it's very, very rare for anybody to discuss anything sexually oriented on the phone. And when I post ads, unless I'm trying to establish prostitution charges on a John, I don't talk anything sexual on the phone. It's just not customary to talk sex acts on the phone. It raises red flags for everybody involved that maybe you're a cop, or it's just not customary.
Now, detective, in terms of, there obviously is a very large, expansive investigation.
Yes.
So, and we mentioned previously that the specific financial documents, the ones that were created by either Marcella or Janet on a day-to-day report, just to be precise, inconsistently in some cases. I'm not sure if she financials or not, but the financials that were kept on a day-to-day basis, those obviously are important to your investigation, correct?
That is correct.
In the course of talking to various people and learning about how the temple paid its bills, what did you learn?
The temple paid its bills primarily by direct depositing money into accounts, like, for instance, the accounts of Sperry, who the house was rented from, into the accounts for the rent. And then they used a net spend account as well that we've heard testimony on. And that net spend account was used to pay Backpage ads. I know that they've paid QuestBill, GoDaddy for their computer, their website off that, Quest. Some other various bills were paid off this prepaid net spend card or account.
As you understand, from this previous testimony, the money that funded those net spend cards, where did that money come from?
It was cash received from the tithes of the women from their sessions.
Published Exhibit 184, Your Honor, which is in evidence.
Yes.
Detective, the net spend card, the supporting investigation used specifically requested information from net spend connected to the cards at the temple. Is that correct?
Yes, we subpoenaed those documents.
Now, what were the names, the specific names of people at the temple who were attached to the various net spend cards?
The net spend card or account that was used most prominently was attached to Miss Elise. There was also one that I believe was expired attached to Miss Craven, and then there was another one that was attached to Tamara, but it was Tamara, it wasn't Brusso, it was a different last name. I want to say it started with an R, but I can't be certain of what that name was. And I believe that one was also expired, so the one that was being utilized was in Miss Elise's name.
I'm just going to turn to, and let me show you page 1 of Exhibit 184. Looking at the item number 4, It appears that the card that's referenced 777 would be attached to Miss Elise.
Yes, and there's her last name, Tamara Kirby. But yes, Miss Elise was the last one.
Just so we're clear, is there anyone else you came upon, or in terms of Tamara, is that a name Tamara Kirby? Is it your understanding that's Tamara Kirby, or not sure?
I'm not certain. I just, I didn't know anybody else affiliated with the temple that had the name of Tamara, so I wasn't sure if that was a name she previously used. In fact, the financials were not significant enough for us to even dig any deeper to determine that.
Sure. I'm going to turn to the account connected to specifically Miss Elise. And you agree that we're looking at that account beginning 777 and it's attached to the name Tracy Elise?
Yes, that's correct.
And just turning to, you agree that the dates indicated here are April of 2010?
Yes.
And is this check with what you learned in your investigation that these NetSpend cards were used to pay, in many cases, Backpage ads on behalf of?
Yes, I believe it's just one NetSpend card, or maybe it was different accounts, but or different cards, but it's just one account. But yes, over a period of time, it consistently paid Backpage ads from that account.
And beyond Backpage, I think you mentioned other sort of specific expenses attached to the temple. I'm going to draw your attention to April 25th, GoDaddy, which would be sort of website maintenance, that sort of thing.
Correct.
And I'm going to turn to page 11 of the account attached to Miss Elise. And again, starting at the top, we're seeing June 2nd, 2011, Backpage ads. You agree, Detective?
Yes, that's correct.
And we're seeing consistent Backpage ads throughout the entire time period that you specifically subpoenaed. Is that correct?
That's correct. The majority of the transactions were Backpage.
Detective, let me ask you this. In your experience, how much does Backpage ad cost? Backpage ads, roughly?
I believe it's about $12 to post, unless you're a priority poster, then it could be more, $30, $35 if you want it to be one of the highlighted ads.
Now, can you say one way or another, Detective, whether or not the number of ads and the amount that are being posted, would that be for one person, or in your experience, would that be posting for multiple ads that are going on?
If this is just for one person, they're posting multiple times a day, and I wouldn't believe that they would spend that kind of money on one person. So I believe that the amount spent was for multiple ads for multiple people.
Last question about NetSpend cards. You, through the course of your career as detective, you have had occasion to take a look at specifically financials and think about paying back. Has that been part of the research in your investigative career?
Yes, not only how other people pay, but I purchase Backpage ads on a regular basis for my undercover work as well.
What have you learned in terms of it? I know there's been a testimony that the only way that you post a Backpage ad was through the NetSpend card. Is that what you found in your career?
That's not accurate. During the time frame 2010, 2011 that we're talking about, you could post on Backpage using MasterCards, Visa cards, and even American Express. And I've posted probably close to 100 ads or more, and I've never had a NetSpend account. It's just not necessary.
There's been, through the course of a lot of this trial, reference to this idea of, well, there's no guarantee. You've heard that every time.
correct?
Yes.
In the course of your sex advisor career, talking to women that you arrest, in your experiences, if someone who is acting as a prostitute posts on Backpage, is there guaranteed that whatever guy shows up is going to get whatever he wants?
Absolutely not.
What have you found in your experience in that regard?
There's all sorts of reasons why somebody might not get what they want. Oftentimes, they see somebody walking up to the door and don't like the way they look. Or they get into the room and they think they might be a cop, or they remind them of their uncle or dad or whatever the case might be, and they turn them away. There's many men, just from my own personal experience and then also talking with the women involved, many men ask for fetishes, things that are very bizarre, obscure, just not straight up sex, and women have no desire to partake in those fetishes. They turn them away. Could be somebody that's got bad body odor, or shows up really drunk or high and gets turned away. There's no guarantee for anybody, any customer, that a specific sex act will occur at the hands of any girls that are out there. I mean, it's just we don't see that.
In your experience, even where a particular female is posting on the Backpage, is engaging in either oral sex or sexual intercourse, guy can walk over and say, hey, can we do this? Even though they are holding themselves and actually working as a prostitute, they might not do that particular thing.
That's correct. And our male undercovers ask all the time things that sexual acts but are not sex or oral sex, and they're turned away quite often.
In your experience, both your experience and that of some of the male players, is it sometimes that a deal doesn't happen because somebody thinks that the person who's willing to talk about is not actually a cop?
That happens often.
In that line of question, specifically what goes on outside, I think the references previously to this, but just to remind the jury, is it sometimes the case that you find that women who are doing acts of prostitution in a massage parlor setting are also working in a legitimate way?
Yes. If a massage parlor is open for business, not every person that walks into that massage parlor is getting sexual gratification. Some of them legitimately are in there for a massage or a foot rub or something to that effect. But every session does not mean that a sex act will be performed by those massage therapists or masseuse, whatever you want to call them.
Ms. Elise has been around this term extensively, self-sabotage, right?
Yes.
Is it your experience that every woman who is engaging in prostitution, advertising, actually doing acts of prostitution, are self-sovereign in it? They can decide whether or not to have sex with this particular person on this particular occasion?
Yes, unless they're being trafficked and their pimps are listening into those conversations and they're afraid for their safety, yes, they are self-sovereign. They can absolutely say, no, we're not going to take part in that.
That's an important distinction. There are situations, certainly, you talked about 2 months ago, which you're most passionate about, is people who don't have a choice or feel like they've been put into a situation where they have to do something.
That's correct.
But there are times where either people in massage parlors or people who there's not a pimp attached to them who make a decision whether or not to have sex with a given dog. Correct?
That is correct, yes.
One of the things that I referenced throughout this several times with the trial is this idea that one, the men were paying for time versus the sex act. Is that something, that sort of language, something you've seen in your career as an executive?
Yes, in fact, that's prominent. Every time we post ads, we set our prices for time. Every time the guys call on girls, it's always the first question is, how much time do you want? Half hour, hour, 2 hours? The fee, the amount, is based on time. In most cases.
Why is it, as you understand, why is it that the way you set out, why that's the language that's used
out in the escort prostitution?
Because they can be more discreet. It's not something, they're not going to advertise a specific sex act for fear that law enforcement is watching or law enforcement will be the individuals calling them. So they feel more secure, more safe in saying, $100 for a half an hour or an hour, whatever the case might be.
Actually, at least in Ms. Craven's testimony, there was, and frankly some of the other practitioners who testified in reference to goddess time or temple time. Do you remember hearing that?
Yes, I've heard that a few times.
Now, I want to draw your attention to a couple of days. We're going to be taking a look at Exhibit 57. Do you remember what this particular exhibit, where this came from, Detective?
Yes, it came from the table behind the reception counter, reception desk, when you first walk into the temple.
Mr. Leiter, one more time, that exhibit number.
57, Your Honor. I'm going to draw your attention to June 15th. And, Detective, you remember through the testimony of Marcella, she talked at some length about how this particular document and calendar was used, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And was it your understanding that this calendar, the principal purpose was for setting up the appointments with the various practitioners?
Yes, scheduling appointments and scheduling rooms.
I want to draw your attention to some sessions first. You see that we're going to be looking at June 15th.
Yes.
And you remember Ms. Evador talking about this particular document as reference. This is what they used in 2011. So this would be June 15th, 2011?
Yes.
Specifically, I want to draw your attention to practitioner Chloe. You see that?
Yes.
And Ken. You see these two sessions here. They look like they're in sort of orange crayon.
Yes.
Okay. In regards to this idea of how much time would be needed or used, what do you see in looking at these particular appointments?
They appear to be two back-to-back 90-minute sessions. The 90 is representative of the 90-minute session, and I can also tell by the 303 that's the donation, requested donation for the 90-minute session, and that's also right there on that one. So looks like it's scheduled from 4:30 to 6, the 90-minute session, and then there's a 15-minute gap in between, and then another 90-minute session from 6:30 to 8 with the second seeker mic.
In your experience, particularly looking at, say, massage parlor investigations, where the massage parlors are doing acts, sexual acts, prostitution, are they back-to-back, or is there a little bit of lag time between sessions?
I would imagine that there's lag time. Sheets need to be changed. Women need to freshen up. Need to reestablish the room, clean it, sanitize it, I would hope.
In fact, in your conversation with Mark Russo, some of those things were specifically referenced as needing to be done to prepare for the next secret process, correct?
Yeah, she did indicate that they were, she just mentioned to us that we needed to make sure we were showering between sessions because that was something they were having a problem with in Temple. And so I would imagine you would have to have a minimum of 15 minutes between sessions to shower.
So this idea is a small amount of time between one person coming in and another person in. That's not something that you don't see in your investigation generally into the escort prostitution.
Correct.
In fact, even, okay, so regarding our software, what about situations where somebody's doing an on-call and there is an employee watching them or is sort of monitoring? Are the John schedules where they could potentially see each other, or is that something that's avoided in their experience?
No, Johns are, that's usually avoided. That's why most individuals have a 2-call system. You call first, they give you the cross streets, and they'll direct you to an intersection or a Circle K or something close to the location, and they want to control when you actually arrive. So if they have a session or they're meeting with a John prior to you, they won't answer the phone right away, or they'll answer and say, hey, I need to take a shower or something like that, and they don't actually give you the address, the specific address, or the apartment number until they're ready for you to show up as a means of controlling when you arrive.
Which obviously, if you're on the phone with the second appointment, you're not going to be engaged in whatever the sex act is on the previous one.
Correct.
Let's I want to talk about some of the specific dates that will have briefly been touched on and will be touched on going forward in the trial. There has been reference both to this cross-examination as well as the testimony of many of the witnesses that Ms. Elise herself did sessions at the Phoenix Council, correct? And for the most part, what was your understanding about where the proceeds, the money that was left for Ms. Elise on some particular occasions that you were, where that money, how much and where that money went?
Ms. Elise's money went directly back to the temple. In most cases, it appeared on the financials, and that's all I have to go on. It appeared as though the entire amount went back to the temple.
Okay, so let's say Ms. Elise, for hypothetical purposes, did a 90-minute session, and I think you said that amount was $303, correct?
Yes, 303, 2402, sliding scale. They use all these different terms, but 303 is what it showed on our little paper.
And let's say this particular speaker left a session about $303. In examining the financial documents, where did that $303 that Ms. Elise was left, where would that money have gone?
It would have gone back to the temple to pay expenses.
So that $303 for your investigation would have gone back into those daily financials that Marcella and Jack Craig were talking about, correct?
Correct.
And then that money would then be put on the net spend count that we have talked about in Exhibit 184, is that right?
Yes, net spend or paid for rent or other bills not paid from the net spend account.
Great. A couple of, and for the record, we're going to be looking at financial documents that are contained within Exhibit 65.001. Let's talk first about, if you can see here, let me go back. What date does this financial document appear to represent?
This is January 2nd, 2010.
And this is that same financial kind of daily tally sheet that you found, that you've seen both Marcella and Janet Craig's testimony, correct?
Correct.
And in terms of, you see Tracy on the left-hand side?
Yes, I see it on there.
And what does this particular document indicate in terms of amount of sessions, length of session, and the money that went back to the temple?
It indicated that it was a 90-minute session, and a total of $300 was turned into the temple, $285 in temple gifts and $15 to the gatekeeper. And it says duo with Matthew.
Again, we're still looking at Exhibit 65.001. I want to draw your attention specifically to the document, daily tally at May 29, 2010. Do you see that, Detective?
Yes, I do.
And on this particular day, what do we see in terms of Miss Elise and
It shows
the sessions that she did and what she contributed to the temple?
It shows that she had a 90-minute session and a 2-hour session, and left $35 for the gatekeeper and $495 in temple gifts or ties. And then
I want to turn to a data tally sheet from June 6, 2010. Do you agree that that's what we're looking at here, Detective?
yes, June 6th.
And let's talk about the sessions that Tracy performed on this particular day.
It says 320-minute sessions, $30 for the gatekeeper, and $570 in temple gifts, and then it says 3-hour next to it.
Do you know what that 3-hour session was?
No, I don't know what that means, if one of the sessions was a 3-hour session or not. I don't see, I've never seen that before.
You're adding these two numbers, the 30 and the 570, as the money that was left for Miss Elise that then went back to the temple. Is that correct?
Yes, and based on that amount, that would only be $600, which means it could have been 3 one-hour sessions, but I don't know that for certain because the 3 does show up in the 120-minute column. Actually, you know what, just real quick, in retrospect, that 3-hour, $600 could very well have been for one 3-hour session. I just thought about that.
Okay. If a secret wanted a 6-hour session, or a 3-hour session, the amount of money left could have been
$600. It could have been one session, one 3-hour session. That would make more sense based on that financial.
Okay. I'm going to show you just a couple of more from Exhibit 63.001. You remember this temple goddess finances?
Yes.
This was the sort of folder document of the most up-to-date finances the previous couple of months up to the point of the rate. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Draw your attention first to June 23rd, 2011. Again, is that the date that this document reflects?
Yes.
What, in terms of the sessions conducted by Ms. Elise, what do we see here?
I can't see the top, but I believe that's the column for one 60-minute session. Yes, one 60-minute session. And it indicates that $740 went back to the temple for that one session. That's a lot for that one session.
Seems like a lot. It could have been a tip. Whatever, or perhaps just reflected in Ms. Elise gave additional money to the temple.
Could be.
Finally, I'll show you September 4th, 2011. Is that what we're looking at here?
Yes.
In terms of the sessions conducted by Ms. Elise, what do you see on this particular document?
Again, it's one 60-minute session and a total of $204 with tied to the temple, which is their hourly, 1-hour requested donation. And it's 10 to the gatekeeper and 194 to the temple.
And Detective, it's your testimony that, and you were understanding through the course of that, that money that was left from Ms. Elise and given, most, if not all of it, would be given back to the temple, and then that money would be used to fund backpage ads, electrical bills, GoDaddy account, and various other expenses connected to the operation of the temple. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
there's been a lot of reference to the website and what you may or may not have examined as part of your investigation. Did you utilize the website, the Phoenix Goddess Temple website, as a resource and as a part of your investigation?
Yes, we utilize the website extensively. Actually, I've personally visited every single section of that website multiple times.
Now, there's been, as a part of continuing the website, you have access to all of the newsletters that were produced by the temple and sent out to various temple email lists.
Yes. Ms. Elise previously asked me if I had subscribed to the newsletters, and I have not subscribed to the newsletters, but I did print off every single newsletter affiliated with the temple prior to us serving the search warrant, because it was our understanding that the website might come down after the warrant. So I had 2 big notebooks of literally every page of the website and every newsletter.
How did you obtain both? The website, you just go to each page and print it out, or
Yes, I literally printed every single page, every link of the website, and put it into a big notebook. And the newsletters on the website, they had them all archived. So they had a newsletter section where I could literally click on every single one of those and print those off, which is what I did prior to us serving warrants at the location.
Ms. Elise has at length talked about, well, did you visit the website, and they were out there, out in the community. Is that what you found as part of your investigation, both examining the website and the newsletters?
They were out there, meaning they had a lot of content on the website. As far as specifics about what happens there in the temple, I would say they were definitely not out there. I guess I should rephrase that. Not what happens in the temple, but what happens in the sessions. There's a lot of content on the website related to circles and ceremonies and trainings and courses and all of that kind of stuff. But there's very little reference to specifics regarding the session work, other than the practitioners who are involved in the sessions and a small FAQ section where people could ask questions about what happens during sessions, and there'd be some responses that were very written, kind of cryptic. There was very little content about specific session activities.
What do you mean by the language of what was cryptic?
I have a master's degree, and I've read a lot of research periodicals and all of that kind of stuff, and I could make more sense of that than what I could make sense of on the website. There's a lot of terminology about yab, yum. I can't even begin to explain, like talking in circles and about goddessy stuff that a layperson like myself that doesn't have any background in that, you can't make sense of it. It doesn't specifically say you will come in and you will do this and we will get together and do this. It's nothing like that. It's all this circle talk about energies and chakras, and so it just doesn't make sense. It didn't make sense to me as a reader. Some of it's I've been able to understand a little bit more just hearing Ms. Elise testify or ask questions of the people up here. It's very foreign to the average reader, in my opinion.
So as someone who's been a vice secretary and investigated sexual orientation for years, in just examining the website, you certainly couldn't determine one way or another whether or not there was actually sex acts that were occurring within the sessions themselves. Is that correct?
That's correct, and that's why it wasn't used extensively with the male detectives that were going in. We didn't have them look at the website, and we didn't refer to the website a lot. I mean, I certainly looked at the website, but we didn't refer to it because it wasn't relevant to what we were specifically trying to investigate.
Because you couldn't determine whether or not they were advertising sex act, the only way you can make that determination is to do the undercover deals. Is that right?
Correct.
Would you agree that there are, within the temple, I think we heard this from virtually every single witness, there were these sort of 2 strands running the temple. The religious aspect, the goddess aspect, the circles, a lot of those things that when women practitioners who testify talk about, they get emotional about and felt strongly about, and then the other strand being how all of that was funded, how all those lessons, how all that the goddess movement was funded in 5 sessions. Is that correct?
That's our understanding, yes.
In terms of specific discussion about the sessions in either the website or the newsletters, is that something that was missing or you were unable to understand?
Well, in looking back through all of the newsletters, there's a lot of information documented in those about circles and classes and visiting teachers and courses and ceremonies and high holy days and astrology. I mean, it just goes on and on and on, and the newsletters are oftentimes, 3 printed pages. But in all the stack of newsletters that's probably, printed out maybe 2 to 3 inches thick, there's only a handful of times that are even mentioned anything related to sessions. And if they're mentioned, it's a tiny little line like, you can book a session, or it's a line about our new water chamber is open, come see us, or something to that effect. But the majority of the content of all those newsletters has nothing to do with the session work. It's all about all that other stuff. And that's what was out there.
I believe we stipulated to Exhibit 231 could be in evidence.
Which one?
In your Honor.
230, but not 231.
Okay.
Is there an objection to 231?
No objection, Your Honor.
231 is admitted.
There's also a stipulation, Judge, to, while we're here, Exhibit 177, which Ms. Elise has had an opportunity to review.
Yes.
All right, 177 is also admitted.
One of the things that was referenced in Ms. Craven, specifically when Ms. Elise was questioning Ms. Craven, was the steps taken towards registering the school and the things got stuff on the corporation commission.
Yes.
We showed a document that included a lot of information and said that was what was sent, was submitted to the corporation commission. Remember that?
Yes, I remember that.
And you remember the document that showed Ms. Craven extensively, not explicitly, in much more detail about session work and kind of what went on or how money was going to be generated.
Yes.
Published 230, Your Honor?
May.
Detective, through the course of the investigation, you got the certified documents from the Corporation Commission in terms of what was actually put up on the Corporation, submitted, put up on the Corporation Commission website. Is that correct?
Yes, we were able to obtain those.
And then on page 2 of that document, Temple 1, School 1. Detective, the document that Ms. Elise showed, which you said was much more detail-oriented about the sessions and speakers and that sort of thing, is what's contained in State's Exhibit, or Exhibit 230, more along the lines of, if you don't know, it's kind of hard to understand what they're talking about.
That's correct. This is more along the lines of what you see, kind of, not all of it, but this is sort of the language on the website that it's hard to read between the lines and know what specifically is going on in there.
Detective, returning to the newsletters, I do want to draw your attention to Exhibit 231, page 2 of Exhibit 231, publisher owner.
Yes.
There's a specific reference to, I think this has been brought up previously, but these Temple Hero cards. What was your understanding about what a Temple Hero card was, how you went about getting them?
It's my understanding that a Temple Hero card was sort of paying up front, and I know Ms. Lisa's probably not going to like the word paying, but providing money up front, and typically I believe they were $1,000 for a hero card, and you gave the money up front, and then instead of just getting 5 sessions, which would be the normal cost of those, $1,000 would get you 5 sessions. Typically, you would get a bonus session, a 6th session, for essentially for free.
And what you're discussing is specifically reference to the offering of support, $1,000. It's each hero punch card for 6 healings, a savings of $224. Is that what you're talking about?
Yes, that's exactly what I'm referring to. And this is just one of the handful of blurbs that was in the newsletter. This is from a newsletter that talks about session work.
So essentially, pay $1,000, you're buying 5, you get 6 free.
Yes.
Just a couple other things I want to follow up with throughout this talk. Beyond obviously speaking with all the practitioners involved, did you make efforts or attempts to speak with various other people that were involved in some way in the temple?
Yeah, we spoke with a seeker that had been to the temple. We followed up with anybody that provided us with information about complaints from the temple, and certainly we spoke with the gatekeepers on the telephone and practitioners. Our male detectives spoke with the practitioners. And then we after the fact, we've interviewed like 18 of the practitioners we interviewed.
There were many people that have been referenced in this case that you either spoke with, maybe you were at travel, or couldn't make a determination was specifically in that session. You spoke with
Yes, we actually got called by one gentleman, David Damien, who was a seeker at the temple. We spoke with him, and we spoke with a lot of...
Your Honor, I object. This witness has been stricken from their witness list, so is it not hearsay because we're not going to talk to this person?
Approach, please. Which person in particular has been struck?
Well, he was on their list as a witness, and now she's talking about him as a seeker. And she's just talking about him, and they have any...
Well, what are you going to ask about this particular individual?
I'm asking about all the people that she spoke with. I'm not eliciting any of the information that they gave her.
Okay. All right, so you're just explaining the scope of her investigation?
Correct.
Okay, fine. Thank you.
There's some other people referenced. Robert Collin, Phoenix, Texas.
There were several people affiliated with the Phoenix Goddess Temple that were not arrested, and those individuals that were not arrested after the fact, we had no means of following up with them.
As part of your investigation, you took a look at the photos that you were not specifically there at the search warrant. You took a look at the photos of the various rooms at the Phoenix Goddess Temple. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And Your Honor, for the record, we're going to be referring to some of the photos contained within Exhibit 12, which is in evidence.
All right.
First, we're going to show you Exhibit 1409. Pardon me. Thank you. Not exhibit. I strike that. Photo 1409 contained within Exhibit 12. Detective, you have had, as part of your investigation, looked at various people's handwriting, and you've also heard various testimony. Whose handwriting are we looking at here?
It's very consistent with Janet Craven's handwriting, at least the top portion.
And this particular document was a document that was found as a part at the temple in either the office or one of the rooms. Is that correct? Appears to specifically reference a temple meeting that occurred on May 3rd, 2011. Do you see that?
Yes.
Okay. Just draw your attention to the third star down. References white typist terminology. Do you see that?
Yes.
Okay. I know you're certainly have testified that you're not any expert in chakras or anything like that, but it references lingam worship. Do you see that?
Yes.
And
upper chakra lingam worship.
Upper chakra lingam worship. It's through learning about the different terms associated with the temple and then obviously receiving the glossary as well. Lingam refers to the penis, correct?
Yes, it does.
And it does kind of how white tigress is described sort of corroborate or check with what specifically some of the other witnesses have testified about what happened in a white tigress session?
Yes, there's been consistency about the white tigress ceremony or session. That's oral sexual intercourse with a male.
Fourth star down references late ties, late fees, short ties. Do you see that?
Yes.
Okay. And again, does that sort of check with the information that you received and you learned in your investigation about some changes that were going on at the temple when times became a little tougher?
Yes, or changes they were hoping to institute, yes.
We're looking at photo 1636. There's a couple of documents here that were posted on the windows. Again, what windows were these?
That is the window outside of Janet Craven's office, the main office.
So, as has been explained by the practitioners and your understanding, at the end of the day, when the goddesses, practitioners have to tie back to the church, they would go to this office through these doors, correct?
Yes.
And this particular document, which I believe is also in evidence the jury's seen, it's specifically referencing the marketing agreement. Is that right?
Yes, it is.
Is that one of the documents that you received in your practitioner info?
Yes.
Okay. Does this document reflect that that was something that was put in place that had to be done, or those particular practitioners would not be listed or would not be offered?
Yes.
And it specifically at the top of photo 1636, it references the result of not making sure the marketing agreement is complete.
Yes, the gatekeepers wouldn't offer use for sessions.
Detective, there's two documents. There's the attention to all practitioners and that back page ads document. Those were posted at multiple locations throughout the temple at the time of the raid. Is that correct?
Yes, we found that back page ad one posted in the locker room. It was on the cabinet in the kitchen. Yeah, multiple places.
Okay. places that would be easy for any practitioners to see as they're either walking through the temple or bringing their tithe to the office.
Correct.
Okay. Effective, we're looking at photo 1735. I think at least a screenshot of this photo was previously shown during Ms. Craven's testimony. What part of the temple are we looking at here?
That would be Janet Craven's desk.
And pictured in the middle of photo 1735, that's some condoms that were found right there. Is that correct?
Correct.
Effective, there's been in the practitioner profile, that information I think the jury's seen a number of times, specifically talks about, this will give you a frame of reference, it talks about various different things, including sort of sticking out on my goddess wrestler. Do you remember that?
Yes.
Okay. But do you also remember there's a specific reference to sex toys and whether or not a practitioner would be comfortable with using sex toys? Is that correct?
Yes. And that was something I asked Tamara Brusso about, if I could bring sex toys in when I came to work at the temple, and she said that that was permitted.
Specifically, we're looking at, first, the previous one was 1784, and it showed a locker of Layla Swan. Do you remember that?
Yes.
In the next photo, 1785, what's reflected here, Detective?
Those are some toys. I don't know if it's a vibrator or what specifically is in that box or bag, but sex toys.
Whether or not Layla Swan was the one who was specifically, we're looking at 1786 now, was specifically using these, there were sex toys found at the temple in the area, in the locker, the area of the lockers. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. There's been a great deal of reference, Detective, to that page. And as a part of your investigation, you obtained hundreds and hundreds of ads from that page or part of your investigation. Is that correct?
Yes.
Did you attempt to, if you could briefly describe the process that you undertook to locate and obtain the ads that you believe were connected to various practitioners at the temple during that time period?
Immediately after receiving the complaint, back at the end of February, first week in March, we started looking at Backpage just because we know that that's an area that's generally advertised on, or a website that's advertised on. And from that day forward, every couple of days, sometimes daily, we would go to Backpage, type in the Phoenix Goddess Temple's phone number, email address, and print off every single Backpage ad associated with the temple. And those were all contained in 2 big books under each practitioner's name. And then towards the end of the investigation, or potentially even after arrests were made, those ads were subpoenaed from Backpage.com.
Sum it up. Why are, as the principal investigator, why are Backpage postings on the Backpage, specifically escort body of domination session, why is that important, critical part of your investigation?
That's a means of getting the customers. Without Backpage ads posted advertising the services available, there's generally not customers coming in. And so most businesses or individuals who are in this line of work utilize Backpage to advertise themselves. And so it was important for us to, one, know the language, know the amounts that are being requested, knowing the pictures, the people. It's a great source of intelligence for us.
Great. published 229, which
Yes.
Carter stipulated 2 points. We're just going to go through a couple of these. I think we're almost finished here. Heard this name referenced quite a bit. We may have seen one picture previously, but who are we looking at here?
That's Nicola Hayden. She used the name Guinevere.
And this, we've talked about Backpage ads, but this particular ad, where did this ad come from?
That came from Eros, and Eros was another place that the Phoenix Goddess Temple advertised on a regular basis.
And Detective, there's, was it specifically, did the coordinator Guinevere advertise, at least in your investigation, in like, as a dominatrix?
Yes, she did.
I want to draw your attention to the bottom of, there's been some, while there is disagreement about whether or not there was any specific upselling of specific sessions, was it your experience that oftentimes the practitioner would indicate that 90 minutes or longer than an hour was preferable?
Yes, we saw that in ads, and we also, as I mentioned earlier, Tamara Brusso indicated that when we met with her.
And that's backed up here by, in this particular page 4 of this ad, where Guinevere is indicating she generally prefers sessions to be 90 minutes or more, as I like to take the time for both of us to enjoy each other.
Yes.
Well, we can't say specifically, but at least would you agree there's an inference to longer session, more will happen?
Yes.
In this particular ad, I'm going to show you page 5. There is a specific reference to the various sessions that Guinevere would be willing to do. Whole body healing, goddess guide me, goddess worship, surrender to yin, which again, detected was the sort of the dominatrix session.
Yes, surrender to yin. Yes.
Power exchange, red ray, and water healing. And this is not something we saw that often, but $260 for an hour, that was more than you would typically see. Is that correct?
Yes, all three of those prices are higher than what we typically saw.
We'll look at another Backpage ad. Specifically, Detective, who is this particular?
That's Star. That was her goddess name, but her name is Danetta Motley Smith.
And again, she specifically talks about the different, in this case she refers to them as healing options, but the types of sessions that apparently she would be comfortable doing.
Yes.
Looking at the next ad, looking at these photos, do you know who this is?
Yes, that's Raya, Rachel Laird.
And again, there's a specific breakdown of the session of the types of offerings that, in this case, practitioner Raya would do, correct?
Yes.
And in fact, in the case of the surrender to yin, there's a specific, little more detail as to what that means for a layperson who's never done that type of thing. Is that correct?
Yes.
How is surrender yin specifically defined here by in this ad?
Sensual domination, play with power exchange, serving the goddess in whichever way she desires.
I think we're looking at another ad that was found as part of the investigation. One of the detectives, how does the number of Phoenix Goddess Temple, how does that ever utilized in doing your back page investigation?
Simply go to the search function on Backpage, type in the phone number, and all the ads connected. Just like a regular Google search, it'll search the ads and pull up all the ads that have that phone number in it. And so that's typically how we found the ads.
So when you would do, at least many times when you do your search for specific ads connected to temples, you would plug in this number, which was the main temple number.
Yes.
Now, it's fair to say that many of the photos, at least some of the photos that would be posted by various practitioners were not maybe as explicit as others that you would see on that page. Is that fair?
That's fair.
Okay. This particular photo, would this be more similar to what you would see with a normally posted escort ad?
Yes, this is very consistent with what we normally see.
Now, you mentioned that one of the reasons that Kiahi was specifically selected for an undercover deal was both that she was a regular and some of the look of the back end. Is that correct?
Yes.
What else do you add for Kiahi? And is this, again, these particular ads a little more explicit and along the lines of normal back page ad posting?
Yes, the photos are consistent with what we usually see on Backpage.
I'll show you an ad for Miss Elise. This similar to many of the ads that you would see for Miss Elise throughout your investigation.
Yes, she often used the same few photographs.
And in this particular case, Miss Elise is referencing Tantra immersion, a 2-hour session for $402. Is that?
Yes, I do.
There's no specific reference to an hour or 90 minutes, just the 2 hours in this particular one, correct?
Correct. I think she also says,
Pardon?
oh, I was just reading it. I just noticed it said Personal Nova. Yes, the big O.
Specifically, this ad says, I'd love to give and receive the Personal Nova. Yes, the big O.
Yes. That wasn't on all the ads.
Is perhaps this language not as changed or slightly different?
It's not.
The intention?
Yes, it's not watered down as much as a lot of them are. Meaning, by watered down, I mean a lot of times they're in a lot of the goddessy language, and this one says Personal Nova, which we know to be orgasm. But she actually says, yes, the big O, to clarify it for people that may not know what Personal Nova is.
Down the back page, were there specific listings for looking for women to come to the temple?
Yes, there were multiple ads where they were looking for women to come to the temple, both here and in Sedona as well. That's where you put in your age, so they just